Right, well, I'm going to start with a quote by this fellow, Charlie Munger, who seems to be a bit like a Warren Buffett sort of character. And a lot of times these people have, I suppose, phrases that they have coined throughout their careers, which demonstrate something about the big world of business. And because humans need money in order to buy things like food and shelter and warmth to survive, it says something about the human condition. So there's wisdom in these quotes, even though businessmen love to put these kind of quotes in their sort of slideshow presentations to wow their audiences with their amazing insights. But nonetheless, even if they're made trite by repetition by people who don't really have any wisdom behind their own eyes, these ideas are certainly worth contemplating, because I find myself now, um, in middle age, looking back on how I was as a young man and as a boy, and even as a young adult and not so young anymore adult. I look back on how I was and how completely naive I was because I thought that people were motivated internally by their own moral framework, essentially, by their own character, by their own moral fiber, by their own courageous backbone in standing up for what they know to be right. But oh boy, how wrong was I? Because really, not only is the primary motivator one of financial gain, but in fact, and to my great horror, disappointment, and demoralization, I suppose, in the sense that it has me so depressed about the prospects for humanity because of how degraded society is. In other words, the collection of human beings with whom I have to share my nation and my civilization with. It has made me so depressed about these people when I've realized things such as they are only motivated, either primarily or only motivated, by the acquisition of money and status and power and career advancement, which pretty much all just point towards acquiring more money and goods, basically just ambition. And what is ambition? It's avarice for more money. Why? So they can buy more things. And they don't really know what things they want to buy. They just know they want to have more money. And it goes hand in hand with power. So these are the incentives. That's what people are motivated by. And what Charlie Munger says is, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. In other words, human beings are that predictable. There might be some exceptions, but in the main, in general, you can basically put financial incentives. The government can use the taxation system. In other words, not just sort of say, we'll give you more money, but there might be grants for doing certain things, and that's how they can get more of a certain behavior, encourage more of a certain behavior. But they can do it the other way, and people don't even realize that that's the method as such. They can tax you less for certain behaviors or tax you more for certain behaviors. And that will predict the outcome. So that's how they control the population, by controlling their behavior. It's as simple as that. And that's why I rue, in other words, I'm embarrassed and I regret how naive I was when I was a child and a boy and everything growing up. And now I understand why people looked at me with such pity, as well as contempt and derision, when they could see that I was that stupid. I thought I was clever, but I was that stupid that I didn't realize that this was what was going on. Ah, poor boy, they must have said to each other. He's not even at the races. He hasn't even a clue of what's going on. So, as what's that film that Tom Cruise was in? Jerry Maguire, I think. Show me the money. He's not going to do anything. He might make promises, or he might make, I suppose, tentative agreements. But until the money is forthcoming, no action will be taken. So you follow the money. If you follow the money, then you will find what people will have been motivated by. And you will find the things that were motivated. So people will just do whatever they're paid to do. So who's ever in charge of the money can control everybody's behavior in a top-down fashion. And that's why I'm so demoralized, because I would have expected that people in general, or at least a lot of people, would say, oh no, I see what's going on here. I definitely won't take the money. Now, there are one or two people, but it's very rare, who will be offered a certain amount of money, a large amount of money, and will say no. And the way generally people talk about, you know, financial incentives, they might say, well, a bribe is a way of saying that, you know? So some people might have principles, they might have good character, they might have backbone, moral fiber, but they still say about people like that, well, everybody has his price. So what would it take for you to turn around and just sort of say, I'll look the other way? You don't have to do anything. You just have to stop trying to make a noise about something. Just go away and look the other way. You might say, oh, I wouldn't do it for all the money in the world. But what if somebody did actually offer you $1 million? And they said to you, you know, take this money, or if you don't like the nice approach, we can always get a bit nasty with you. And they might, you know, if you have children, they might say, oh, it'd be terrible if, you know, something might happen to them on the way to school. Oh no, I'm just saying it's a lovely family you have there, and I have a family myself, and you know, you always worry about your children, don't you? That's enough for even the most stupid of people to sort of say, ah, I'll take the money. Because now you've just created a big sliding scale. It's not just you went from 0 to 1 million, but they're saying we could take that million away, a bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Oh, we don't want you to have that anymore. And you could suddenly find yourself in negative, unquantifiable. What are your children worth to you? What's your wife worth to you? What's your own life worth to you? You know, or they could sort of say suddenly, well, your credit cards don't work anymore. Your ATM card doesn't work anymore. Your bank suddenly doesn't know your name. And then, you know, you're trying to pay your mortgage payments, but none of the transfers are clearing. And you protest that, but, you know, you're innocent and it must be a big mistake. But these people are all friends with and control the board of directors of every bank. They can and that's just the beginning of the nastiness, but they will kill you financially. So if people would offer you 1 million, 10 million, and you're clever enough, and 100 million, you're clever enough to sort of say, well, you know, you're at the level where you realize, oh, everybody at every level in society is compromised, up to and including the president, all the cabinet ministers, the military. You kind of go, well, so the people in the general population don't know and don't want to know in the general scheme of things. So what do? Well, you capitulate. Or else people will say, actually, you're not being brave anymore, you're just being stupid, because you have no hope of winning. So there you are. Show me the incentive and I will show you the outcome. And that's why I say I'm demoralized. Because it's a psychological tactic of war where you sort of begin to realize, not only can I not win, but the people who I think that I'm fighting for don't really exist anyway, because they would certainly take the money. And even if they might be thankful momentarily for me taking what seems to be a courageous stance, I'm not saying that I have any dirt, but, you know, putting myself in the position of some of these people, such as, well, I'll do it in another video, but I've put a community post, or I will soon, about a fella, his surname is McGill. And he definitely seems to be somebody who maybe is at this moment going all in and saying, well, if it costs me my life, it costs me my life. But he is likely saying to himself, I wonder about the wisdom of having done what I did. And that's the way all martyrs are. They're doing something out of a higher-minded principle. And there comes a point where they're not even doing it for the people. They're doing it simply because it's the right thing to do. Even if there is no God, even if there's no reward in heaven, even if there's no hell for just bowing the head and yielding to what seems to be the very well compartmentalized and very resilient to attack chain of command. Resilient meaning if you attack any section of it, it just rebuilds, because they have every detail of society sewn up in a corporation. And so that's what I want to get on to now. And perhaps it's good that I had a bit of a preamble there, because I'm going to, towards the end of this, get on to things that really aren't allowed to be, and certainly weren't, mentioned, let alone discussed on YouTube. Which is why maybe, I'm not so sure whether I'll put it on YouTube or not. Might put it on one of my alternate platform on Odyssey. But I do want more eyes to be on this. I'll say that. I mean, that's one of my incentives. Despite the fact that I think that the situation is hopeless, I think that the situation, if it has any chance of being turned around, fixed, cured, the ills of our society cured, the structure of our society fixed, remedied, torn down and rebuilt again. I think that I'm not calling myself brave, but I'm not saying that I'm changing the world either, but it's my little contribution. Every drop of water must fall to create the vast ocean or tidal wave of change, make the sea change, you get the idea. I don't want to stretch metaphors here. I'll briefly mention and move on, in case you haven't heard of it, because I inferred, in other words, deduced that such a thing existed, although I didn't know the name several years ago, and I proved it from within the corporation that I worked in, even though people denied it right to my face. But I then proved that they were lying, and I put it to them that they had lied to me. And they stood in front of me saying, "Oh yes, it exists. Oh no, it doesn't exist." In the same sentence. Things start. I actually reached the level of the Schrodinger's cat where I was simultaneously alive yet dead. And people still looked at me, people who I'd known for a long time, people who had put it in writing and everything else. They were denying that. They'd say, "Oh, I don't know what I mean. I didn't mean that. Oh, I do mean that." I got down to the quantum level of what people seem to believe or not. And there is a point as well at which people do self-delude, even though they're aware that they're being malfeasant. In other words, legally responsible for their own wrongdoing, even if you're not outright calling them malevolent and liars. So there's a very strange thing where I think no matter who they are, self-delusion takes over, even though they know what they're at as well. Right, I'm still on my preamble, but I think it's important. Because you could get investigative, I'm not going to say journalism, but you get executive journalism from other people, and you could get current affairs from other people as well. But I'm not in the current affairs business. I'm in the making a point from the local to the I messed it up, from the local to the worldwide, or from the specific to the general is really what I want to say. I'm in that business, and so that does fit with my username, Eternal Extrapolations. That you know where you are, you have a fine point of data, and then you can infer, or I suppose deduce, other points of data radiating outwards from that point. In other words, you're standing on a stone block and you're putting your feet out tentatively, in other words, gingerly or cautiously, towards other places where you might be able to rest your foot and have another solid foundation, but tentatively, because you're not saying it is true, but you're saying based on a pattern that you've seen up to this point so far, you might make the same measurement as you've, basically past performance is a measure of future performance anyway. Future outcomes, to just use a different word. So there's environmental and social governance. If you don't know the term, be familiar with it, because that's the name of the top-down control of policy and people. They use money to control people's behavior, and that's a euphemism for the behavior that they control and the methods by which they control it. And there are certain people that are more easily controllable than others. But from every group and every type of people in the world, there are people who decide to sort of say, I will step outside the group. I'll hold my head above the parapet. I won't just keep my head down like all the other daisies on the field. I'll run the risk of getting my head cut off by the lawnmower blades. Those are the disincentives. Right. Now, into what inspired that opening, how should I say? Well, preamble. In all this talk about this fellow, and there's so many things you just don't know what you're allowed to say, but Anyway, his name is James O'Keefe. He was the founder of Project Veritas, but he's recently been ousted, fired from the corporation which he started. And nobody, in talking about this, ever really explained how it is that a man who founded his own corporation and is the CEO, the chief executive officer of that corporation, could be fired by that corporation. What? How does that happen? And for spurious reasons, you know. Apparently, he had a show trial where for 7 hours people listed off their grievances with him, like that he'd spoken a harsh tone to them. Things like this. The board threw in something else, like that he had taken a private flight from some place to somewhere else, or maybe several places. That's what chief executive officers do. So it's what obviously happened there. It was a case of Joseph Stalin's method of show trials, kangaroo courts, in other words, or slightly different term, but in other words, the outcome is fixed, and they do it for basically the public impression, because most people are too stupid to realize that it's just for to pull the wool over their eyes with a fairly facile and obvious public theatre of finding a man guilty as though he had found evidence. And then he went, oh, we'd better get rid of this guy because we're, full of moral jurisprudence. No, it's basically, we want to get rid of a guy and let's try and gin up some charges and see if we can make them stick. Gin, in other words, like, magic them up. He spoke harshly to people and he had people feeling terror or uneasy or uncomfortable in the office. My God. You can see how it's all a tangled web of like make people feel that like they have entitlement to feel certain ways about their boss, or to not be barked at or spoken to harshly. My God. This is the generation of people who have never been corrected or given out to, let alone smacked or beaten for misbehavior or lack of discipline. That they've grown up even in school without being have shouted at or have a voice raised at them. So who are the people then who had power to fire him? Well, the board of directors. And I thought to myself, why does he have a board of directors? Why would somebody who started a company and is in control of a company then say, do you know what, I think I don't want to be in control of my company, at least not fully, at least not in a majority form? Why would you do that? Well, let's listen first of all to a couple of people on this, and if you don't understand or pick it up from what it is that these people say, then I will explain it to you and state it in as clear a manner as I can. And I'm not talking down to you. I'm just sort of saying I'm irritated and frustrated that this isn't the primary thing that everybody explains. And I think that they don't really want to get into it because they think everybody is compromised to some extent, or knows that they can't really talk about it because it's putting things too much into focus, putting a very fine point on the pencil, or whatever the phrase is, fine point on the dot over the I. They don't want things to be too sharply focused, because then it would point at the people behind all the malfeasance. So let's listen to Luke Rudowski of We Are Change channel here very briefly.
Of course, the ousting of James O'Keefe that was removed from Project Veritas following, of course, a board dispute. This as he was running an official nonprofit, a nonprofit that you need independent board members of, that seemed to have had an insurrection.
Right, that's why. He registered as a nonprofit, a 5013C. Now, I'll leave that till another time to get into it, and maybe, this video is a bit long. That is probably I don't want to look it up now because that's probably going to take us down another rabbit hole. But he wanted to register as a non-profit, and if you're going to do that, you have to have a board of directors. Right? Now, that kind of makes sense in a certain way, in that if you want to set up a charity, you can't just set up a charity with you as being the only sort of controller of that charity. Because I suppose the thinking is that you'd want to have at least one other person, so that ideally you would then have to make it a conspiracy. And it's harder to keep a secret if maybe you would be, siphoning off money and stealing money. You'd have to involve more than one person, and therefore you'd have to have perfect trust between those two people. And then if you had more people, a board of directors, you can see the logic behind it, that ideally that board of directors, each one of them would have to collude in order to rip off the people who would contribute to the charity. And they'd each have to maybe argue about who gets the share, the greater share or an evil share, or an equal share. So they'd be more likely that one of the disgruntled members would blow the whistle if there was any sort of misappropriation of funds. Do you see? I think that that's the likelihood. But if you can compromise everybody or have everybody of a certain kind of character on that board of directors, if you control all those board of directors from a higher organization, and especially if you go back to, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. If those people are all compromised in some way, if there's blackmail, dirt on all of those people, so that if they can be got to in some way, either threatened, with harm to them or their family, or exposure of some kind of misdeeds, whether that be related to, sexual blackmail or any other kind, as it usually is, then those people can be controlled by people above them, and they might not even know who they are. Now, let's look at the Wikipedia page for Project Veritas. Can we find out who the board of directors are? Well, unfortunately, we can't. And why is that? And the reason for that is that if you are registered as a charitable organization, or in the United States, according to this particular statute, or, basically a sort of a legal structure that was passed by some kind of bill or statute or act of Congress, then you do not have to list the board members. They can remain anonymous. Isn't that convenient? So it says in Wikipedia page here, as a non-governmental organization, Project Veritas is financed by a conservative fund, Donors Trust. So there's an actual corporation that exists to fund charities. That's the next layer up in the pyramid. So it's funding lots of other charitable organizations or 5013C registered organizations, however many of them are likely funded by Donors Trust. Donors Trust says it is an American non-profit donor-advised fund. So it itself is a non-profit organization. So that it wouldn't need to divulge its members. Interesting, isn't it? Although its CEO here, it says, is Lawson Bader. And its board of directors, okay, no, well, maybe it does need to, or maybe it doesn't have to, but it does anyway. Lawson Bader. Now, Bader sounds Germanic to me. I'm pretty sure it means a bather, one who bathes, one who takes baths. But is it really German? Anytime I hear a German, or what sounds like a German surname, it gives me pause for thought. Maybe some people have different ideas than I do. There would be a time before where I wouldn't have my ear tuned into any of this. That back when I was a naive boy. But it always gives me pause for thought. Kimberly Dennis. Well, that sounds like a lovely American Midwestern woman. Is it? I don't know. Maybe a photograph would be more revealing. Thomas Beach, George G. H. Coates Jr. None of those people seem to have their own Wikipedia entries, so I'll leave those things for other people to look into. James Pierson is an American scholar. Is there much on him? Not really. So these maybe are some of the people whose names you never hear of. And I'll leave that little rabbit hole for anybody to else go down into, investigate who the Donors Trust are. But at this point, it starts to get a little bit nebulous, even though there are some names there in that board of directors. Affiliations, Donors Capital Fund. So very generic names, I would suggest as well. So the Donors Trust is affiliated with the Donors Capital Fund, right? So a trust is like a type of company that you can put funds into, and then a capital fund is where you can get them from, maybe, or raise funds. Revenue, 202 Is that just million? Seems like small change. But anyway, that's that's the muddy waters. That's where things start to become obscured. Who were these people? Who are these people on this board of directors of Project Veritas? And they take orders from Donors Trust, right? So there is a chain of command, even to know that there's a chain of command down through which orders can be given. You know, that we didn't mind when this was sort of profit generating and all part of the system. But when he's actually attacking a legitimate hand that's feeding him, even though he might not know it. You know, that the hand might be wearing many gloves, but he's now actually nibbling at no longer a prosthetic hand. I don't want to mix my metaphors or create kind of nonsensical metaphors, but I that's forming in my mind here that there are maybe, you know, fake effigies of corporations, but he might have been biting quite close to something that actually had real flesh and blood behind it, if you see what I mean. And the order came down, right, you have to get rid of him. It might expose us for a bit, but most people won't bother trying to figure it out. Most people won't really care. Because unfortunately, what you still fall back into the trap of thinking of is that a corporation is just its logo, its building. And you don't really think, well, it's actual people. Who are the actual people? A corporation is just a legal fiction. It's a non-entity. How could it exist unless the people inside it did things? And it's a facade to cover, in either many or all cases, the malfeasance that goes on within. So there was something else here that I wanted to, and I've gone to the next tab there to have a look, and maybe the Donors Trust here. Right. Well, some of the donors, as of 2013, Donors Trust had 193 contributors, mostly individuals and some foundations, all very nebulous and murky. The Charles G. Koch, or Koch Foundation, Koch, or Koch, very famous foundation. Charles Koch, as I've heard it pronounced a lot, but I'm not certain that's the way to do it. But Charles and David Koch, industrialists again, owned so many things. A lot of power concentrated in a couple of hands there. And yes, there's something to contemplate when you hear that German name. Is it really German? Now, why did I have Donald Trump? Because he's in here or he's in somewhere. Yes, okay, so I had missed this here. It was the next line. As a non-governmental organization, Project Veritas is financed by conservative fund Donors Trust, which provided over 6.6 million from 2011 to 2019, and other supporters, including the Donald J. Trump Foundation. Indeed. So you see, we all did think, or maybe some people do still think, and you know, I know that there are some downsides. Are there any upsides? I'm keeping an open mind still. The Donald J. Trump Foundation is listed as a donor to Project Veritas. So does Donald J. Trump own his own foundation? Probably not is the answer, even if he did set it up himself. Can we find out anything more about it? I mean, we know that like his own cabinet was full of people, such as his son-in-law. Like, is he the guy that runs it? So does that give him the power then to call the shots and sort of say, hey, we're funding Project Veritas, so we have a large say in pulling the ripcord here, you know, or sounding the alarm, or pressing some kind of red button and saying eject, abort, you know. Look, again, I mean, there's so much there that I kind of want to leave it for somebody else to look into. Now that I'm recording, you know, I sort of seem to remember that I found something in there, but it's difficult to read through this and have it all ready to hand, you know. Doing it live, you know, sort of is difficult to do, although I'm recording this and I'll put it up unedited, you know. which is why there was a little bit of a pause here and there. Solicitations of donations without a license. Oh, that was one of the scandals, apparently, that he was involved in. Somebody must have wanted to shut this down if they couldn't control it. Failure to maintain legal, ethical controversies or controversies. Failure to maintain proper governance. That's back to ESG, environmental social governance. Right? What governance means is control. Control over things. That's what governance means in their parlance. I can tell you it's a euphemism for that. Governance. And unelected control, specifically. But you're not supposed to realise that. Nobody elected them to be in power. Now I'll move on, right? And I want to give you another example of a corporation and its board of directors, right? So this is not registered as a 501c3s, right? So you must declare the board of directors if you are a legally registered corporation who trades publicly. And here's the board of directors. Satya Nadella, right? So it's no longer Bill Gates who's the CEO for quite a while now, nor Steve Ballmer. So since 2014, it says, this Indian fellow, Satya Narayana Nadella, has been the CEO. But here's a fellow called Reed Garrett Hoffman. Another Germanic sounding name, eh? Hugh Johnston. Sounds like a nice Midwestern person. Terry Liststol. Bit more Germanic there, but could be from somewhere like Minnesota. You wouldn't know. Sandy Peterson. Oh, she could be from Michigan, Minnesota, somewhere Midwest. Interesting. Peterson. But again, again, all these people, you could look up their curriculum vitae, in other words, what they did during the course of their lives. Penny Pritzker, American billionaire, businesswoman and civic leader who served as the 38th United States Secretary of Commerce. And I never heard of her, under the Obama administration from 2013 to 2017. You see, we don't tend to. I mean, even somebody like myself who is kind of, sentient, you don't have time to be looking into who's the Secretary of Commerce. But it's a massive job and has so much power and control and effect on our lives. But we're all so busy just trying to scratch a living, getting up every day and trying to shake off the tiredness and just to walk around and not let people realise that you're barely there because you're kind of asleep on your feet anyway. How do we have time? That's a big thing. How do we have time to be looking into these things? Penny Pritzker. You could be fooled into thinking she's all American there with a lovely coif on her hair. But she can afford to have her hair done for an official portrait. But that's the best she's going to look, Charles Scarf. Scharf. Sounds like their Germanic name or the German for scarf. Arne Sorensen. Sounds more Swedish. Danish, maybe. Norwegian, perhaps. Scandinavian, anyway. John W. Stanton. John W. Thompson. Oh, I thought he was going to be British. Emma Walmsley. And you just don't know, and here's somebody else. Padmasri Warrior. Her surname is Warrior. Indeed, really. Is an Indian-American businesswoman and technology executive. Now, when I see something like that, I do wonder whether she has my interests, my best interests at heart. She is known for her leadership roles in technology firms like Cisco, where she served as Chief Technology Officer for 7 years, and at Motorola, where she was also the Chief Technology Officer for 5 years. And she also served as the CEO of NIO USA, an electric car maker. She is the founder of Fable, a curated reading platform focused on mental wellness. Well, isn't that lovely? Also serves on the board of directors of Microsoft and Spotify. I mean, what is it? I mean, it's just because I'm a sexist misogynist. She doesn't look like that she would be somebody who would know anything about anything. She just looks like somebody's Indian grandmother. What is it that she brings to the job? Is it that she just completely follows orders? I would have to, because I am highly skeptical about these things now, highly jaundiced. one does wonder exactly what qualities she brings to the job. What exactly does she do daily? What are her day-to-day duties or contributions? What is it that she would earn the big bucks for from being on the board of directors of more than one corporation, including Microsoft? Let's get on to another corporation here. And I won't say the name, but you can see it there. I'll say that, if you're going to have a soda, we'd call it a fizzy drink and leave it at that, right? A fizzy drink, and just not say the name. Can we look up the board of directors here? Not as easily as for Microsoft. It's not there in an easy tab there, But if I just search for board, I think that's how I did it, right? Scott Gottlieb. Right, again, another sort of Germanic name. Is it Germanic? I have to say, he doesn't look like, I'll get onto a bigger photograph of him later, he doesn't look like from that photograph what I would imagine to be, the stereotypical German sort of a person. He resigned as FDA commissioner in April 2019. Isn't that interesting? And joined the board of this fizzing company 3 months later. Now, one would assume that you shouldn't need to have a law against that. One would imagine that if anybody saw that was happening, they would say, oh, well, that can't be allowed to happen. There's obviously a conflict of interest. And not only that, but there must have been a corruption that had gone on previously. Because if he's transferring to the board of directors now, that's his reward for likely knowing human nature and the way that people are motivated. He must have already been being paid off in the previous years. People might say, well, to assert that is tantamount to libel or slander. But can we not just kind of, stop playing games here and go back to show me the incentive and I will show you the outcome? And people often, are too confused about cause and effect. Yes, they kind of do put effect beforehand and then cause afterwards. The cause is that he was appointed to the board of directors. The effect happened in the previous years, where either outright he was bribed and told, listen, you'll be paid handsomely later for being on the board of directors, right? Or maybe it was tacitly implied, or, something was said in not so many words. People aren't stupid when it comes to these kind of financial incentives. A nod and a wink is how it used to be described as, I'll scratch my back if you scratch yours. Whatever, I think I messed it up, but you get the idea. And with a nod and a wink, the deal was made. Ink didn't need to be on paper, so there doesn't always need to be a paper trail. It can be officially, technically all perfectly lovely. But please, people will still deny this and say, no, one couldn't possibly have anything to do with the other. Whatever happened, that was before he was a member of the board of directors. Yeah. Anyway, you understand, I'm not, speaking down to you, dear listener. It's out of frustration at how our society is willfully blind. You understand? And they like the wool being pulled over their own eyes. Scott Gottlieb. So he lobbied various officials in the government of British Columbia between April and November of 2012, including the then Premier, Christy Clark. She was the Premier of British Columbia on the western side of Canada. Future Premier John Horgan, future Health Minister Alan Dix, and future Deputy Premier, Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General Mike Farnworth. The disclosed purpose was to provide health policy and pharmaceutical information and communications on behalf of Pfizer Canada and learn and understand the budgetary policy and strategic directions of the government. And he did this lobbying between April and November of 2012, and then in April 2019 he joined the board of directors of this fizzing company. Well, there you have it. Right? In their world, time does not have to flow forwards, it can flow backwards. but there's a very linear description of cause and effect there. Even if you want to sort of say, well, in 2012, it was effect, and in 2019, there was the cause. I mean, there it is. And that's the kind of fine point that people don't want to put on things. And just to put a very fine point on it, I am suggesting that there are corporations above this corporation. Maybe corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard and others perhaps, and maybe there's something above them. And you're going to find a lot of the same people who are members of these same boards of directors on many different corporations. And at some point they can sort of say, right, send the message down, get rid of that guy, Project Veritas guy, James O'Keefe, get rid of him. And maybe somebody might say, but you understand that's going to look bad. But maybe most people, they don't get to their positions by ever contradicting or countermanding, certainly not countermanding, but not even questioning the people above them. And say, are you sure, boss? That might be misadvised, or that might be ill-advised, that might be a misstep, boss. They know their bosses do not want to be questioned or second-guessed. They just carry it out. They don't ask why. Ours is not to ask the reason why. Ours is but to do or die. From the charge of the Light Brigade. So they just do it. And that's why, by the way, that I never got on well or promoted well, or, I didn't have a meteoric rise to the top. I never had a rise to the top in any shape, form, or whatever. Shape or form. Because I would constantly sort of say, oh, are you sure? That doesn't seem in line with what we are saying our objectives are. Because they always deny with the mouth what they do with the hands. Do you see? And I was always saying, but what we're doing here, what you're asking us to do, that doesn't align with what you say to us or publicly, or what our mission statement or objectives, stated publicly objectives are. They don't want to hear that. They just want you to shut up and do what you're told. That's why these people, I suggest to you, get into their positions. They have been absolutely vetted and verified to be the types of people who do what they are told without ever questioning the people in their chain of command above them. Never question their superiors. Now again, if it sounds like I'm speaking harshly, not that I can be ousted from my own corporation here by any of you, but I don't have a corporation. That's why. Anyway, just to remind you, I hope you can tell, I'm not speaking harshly at you because I'm angry with you. I'm angry with this ridiculous pretense and how easy it is to look at this, and yet our truth tellers out there. And I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm better than Luke Rudowski or whatever, but excuse me, you can see why they don't go this far. Because this is naming specific names here, Scott Gottlieb, right? Now let's have a look, right? Is he on the board of directors here? Yes, he is. There he is. Special partner, New Enterprise Associates, Inc.'s healthcare investment team, and resident fellow. A fellow is somebody who's just on the payroll, there to advise, like in a university, just there to advise younger people. So it's a very vague title. It's like an honorary title. Keep him on the payroll, and he might be useful for many things, and we don't want to get very specific about what it is that he does. Dr. Gottlieb served as the 23rd Commissioner of the US Food and Drug Administration from 2017 to 2019. Prior to serving as Commissioner, Dr. Gottlieb held several roles in the public and private sector, several roles, including serving as Managing Director of T.R. Winston and Company from 2013 to 2017. I don't know what the company is, I don't know what it is, but maybe somebody else could take it upon themselves to look into it. He was previously the FDA's Deputy Commissioner for Medical and Scientific Affairs from 2005 to 2007, as well as the Senior Advisor to the FDA Commissioner from 2003 to 2004. So he worked his way up a little bit. He was the Senior Advisor. Dr. Gottlieb is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and is also a contributor to the Financial News Network. Indeed. CNBC. Indeed. So he's got a tentacle into the news media. That would be useful if you were a director of a fizzing company, wouldn't it? Who needed to make sure that certain things were said or not said about them in the news media. Director Illumina. Well, isn't that? I wonder whether that company, I bet you, would be enlightening if you looked into it. It might be illuminating what you might find. Haven't looked into it myself, just a guess. He was director of Aetion, Ition, I don't know, Inc., a private Aetion, a private healthcare data technology company and Tempus. Private healthcare data technology company. Nice bit of euphemism there for whatever they're doing, collecting biomedical data on people. And Tempus being the Latin for time, a private technology company. Again, vague and nebulous. Board member of National Resilience Inc. Scientific Advisory Board. Member of Cell Carta. A carta as a map. That's Latin for map. So mapping the genome, perhaps. Pfizer director since 2019, chair of our Regulatory and Compliance Committee and member of our Science and Technology Committee. Isn't all of that lovely? What a lovely fellow. Aged 50 years. Now, there are other people here, and maybe this has gone on a bit long, and there might be time to look into them all. We know about that fella, but having had a quick look at his blurb there is kind of like a bit like a curriculum vitae or resume. It's interesting reading there. Let's just have a look at some of this rogues gallery here. James C. Smith. Nice and generic. James Quincy. Suzanne Nora Johnson. Shantanu Narayan. Another Indian-sounding looking fellow. Dan or Littman. Another Germanic-sounding fellow. Really? Let's have a quick look. Helen L. and Martin S. Kimmel, Professor of Molecular Immunology at the Skirball Institute of Biomolecular Medicine at an NYU Langone Medical Center since 1995, and an investigator. Howard Hughes. Well, he was the guy who went so paranoid crazy about coming into contact with anybody that he locked himself into his apartment, his penthouse apartment, and wouldn't come out. Isn't that it? And then developed some very unusual, odd personal hygiene behavior. Professor of Microbiology and Immunology at the University of California, San Francisco, from 85 to 95. Perhaps there's just too many words there. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave Dan R. Littman, MD, PhD for now. Age 70 years, indeed. Susan Hockfield, indeed. Professor of Neuroscience and President Emerita. As far as I understand it, that means a female honorary professor, or president, rather. Which I think means that, it's a bit like tenure if you're a professor. You can stay being the president even if there's an acting president, but you can stay being the honorary president. I think that's what it means. Emerita, emeritus. Out of merit. Right? They just think you're so great, that's what you can be. You don't have to be voted in by a board. But of course, we don't live in a meritocracy society. So I don't know anything about her, but I'm going to say a lot of the times these appointments are perhaps nepotistic or political, or based on, well, here's your award for scratching somebody's back at some point. Again, I would encourage people to read all these people's biographies, short bios, and perhaps take a look into them. Helen M. Hobbs. Really, I'm trying to find something there that may not be there, but you never know. Look, after a while, you just begin to get very skeptical. Joseph J. Echevarria. I think I don't have time to go in looking into all these, but Susan Desmond Hellman, really. Well, senior advisor and board member of the Bill and Melinda Gates Medical Research Institute from 2020 until 2021. Really? What was going on from early 2020 until 2021? It was a very crucial year, wasn't it? So there you go. I mean, some of the same people, as I mentioned already, who were board members of one corporation will be board members of another corporation. Could there possibly be a conflict of interest? Well, the phrase used to be in ancient Rome, uh, 2000 or so years ago anyway, that not only must Caesar be beyond reproach, but Caesar's wife must be beyond reproach. So, I mean, even if everything is above board, everything has to look above board too. So, how does it look for somebody like her to be a member of this fizzing board, as well as on the board of Microsoft, one of Microsoft's founders, Bill Gates and Melinda Gates? Bill met Melinda Gates, as far as their story goes, within Microsoft. So should he really have been engaging in an affair with just an innocent little worker in there? She was apparently had the job of leading the team that was creating Encarta CD or DVD ROMs, at the time when they were sort of saying multimedia was going to be amazing with this vast new storage medium of CDs and DVDs. So Encarta was going to be Microsoft's, before really the web was viable for such a thing. It's going to be Microsoft's encyclopedia. That's what I seem to remember from Melinda Gates. But there we are anyway. That certainly warrants further investigation. Former chief executive officer of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation from 2014 until 2020. And then she was promoted, I suppose, to be senior advisor and board member from chief executive officer. So that's, if that is indeed a promotion, isn't it interesting to know that to go from chief executive officer to senior advisor and board member is a step up? So you can go back into the shadows a little bit. Less of a public-facing figure than the chief executive officer, but have more control, more power. And then hence top-down contributor to the chain of command of who is at the top. Who is the chief executive officer and sole board member of whatever type of corporation is at the top of all these, that cascades downwards the environmental, social, and corporate governance. In other words, unelected control. Who sends down dictates, who dictates downwards. So we're living not in democracy, but in a dictatorship. And we don't even know it, and we don't know who is the dictator. Isn't that a perfect situation? When you cannot be questioned, cannot be overthrown, when nobody knows who you are and aren't even aware that you're controlling everything through the structure. The tangled web, not just a pyramid, not just circles within circles, but a tangled web of corporate structures. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that has put things into more sharp relief, put a fine point on things. I don't mean to be overusing that phrase, but so that we aren't writing with a blunt pencil. I think that sharpness, that acuity of perspective needs to be constantly refined. Otherwise it grows blunt. Our perceptions grow blunt unless we continually remind ourselves of this. And I think this gets very close to it. So that explains why. Did I play this last video? Maybe I didn't, and I'll play this out here, right? So that Gavin McInnes here, even though he is absolutely not to be trusted either, he's proven himself to be an untrustworthy character, but he's very funny, and he does definitely have some insight into the way things are run businesses, because he started up his own business, Vice, and then sold it for a profit. And I think that he, talks about how, he had to have a board of directors, and he more or less was pushed out as well. So that's how they do it. They're great at business, these people, who are able to push people out of corporations that they start. Let's just hear what he has to say, and then I'll say goodbye to you.
People asked, why have a board? I thought I had explained this. If I give $2 million to a company, I want someone there to babysit the money and make sure that James isn't a cokehead spending it all. That's why you have a board. They're representatives of the investment. And by the way, inside scoop, all of the major money dudes are leaving with James. Now, like with most companies, most of the money comes from little doses. And all those people some of them are calling asking for their money back. But the main guys, they're going over to the Butt Boys.
Right, I'm going to leave it on that, because I think he's now trying to sort of walk back a bit what he's saying. But the main thrust of the thing is that even if you aren't registered as a non-profit, so even if you are a corporation that is receiving venture capitalism. They don't just give you money and say, right, you just do your thing. They have money men who are not necessarily people who are familiar with the type of industry or type of product that you're doing or engaged in. They have people who aren't idiots. They're not fools. They have financed and funded many things in the past, and so they know how to, you know, not only keep good accounting books, but they have a tight hand on the purse string. So they don't just give the person all the money. They become their boss then. Whoever holds the monies, whoever is in control of the purse strings, controls the corporation. So from the point that you receive financing, investment from these corporate investment firms, then you no longer have control of your own corporation, regardless of whether it's registered as a charity or not. That's what happened. So from the moment that you make it big, that's when you need to have your own personal ethics, your own morality already pre-derived. It needs to be a solid structure, not just nebulous, because things can get very confusing and vague for you and indistinct about your own personal morality when people start coming to you and say, oh, that's a fantastic product, or that's a great idea. We have people who'd like to invest. Would you like to have a meeting? They wine and dine you. All of a sudden, they're talking these big telephone numbers of money. And you suddenly, aren't so clear on exactly what it was that you felt your vision was and your moral imperative was as far as doing good in the world. They might sort of go, listen, you haven't got this far from being so naive. Come on now, it's time to play with the big boys. Don't you worry about it. We have a few good guys. They've done this kind of thing before. Leave it in our hands. So another incentive. They take all the hard work of the financing and they leave you to concentrate on the core aspect of your business, whether it be investigative journalism or making products or selling services or whatever it might be. So again, hopefully that puts a fine point on it. And I'll leave it at that. And I might be brave and upload this to YouTube. But if you are replying on YouTube, please be cognizant that we need to speak a little bit with some circumspect, or be a bit more creative about how we express ourselves. I don't think you need to be so cautious when you're writing comments on Odyssey. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again hopefully soon.